Oh, don't stand up. Gosh, you can do that at the end if you want. If you don't want, whatever. I got to make sure all of you understand. First of all, good morning. I'm cool. There's no ego up here, even though it may appear counterintuitive that a speaker doesn't have an ego. I got over this how many people in the room syndrome a very, very, very long time ago. In fact, this is very strange, Jill. You may want to hear this. I was at a teachers convention in Edmonton, Canada, which is, I'm from Calgary, which is just down the road from Edmonton, and there were 9,000 teachers at this event, 3 different venues. I was the closing speaker on day 1, and there were 3,000 chairs in the audience at the Edmonton Convention Center, and there was around 400 teachers there. I want you to picture what 400 people in a seated 3,000 area looks like. It looks even more empty than this. So don't worry about it. I agree with you, Jill. Whoever showed up, showed up. We're going to have stragglers coming in. And I'm going to also say something that's going to sound like I'm trying to be humble, but this is not really what your event is actually about. It's flattering to be the keynote, whatever that means. It's flattering to be a speaker, whatever that looks like. But I think you understand that the learning happens with the sessions, the learning happens with the experience that you have in this field. In case you didn't notice, I have no arms, so obviously I'm not a chiropractor, although that's not necessarily obviously. But I think what's fascinating is this is what I do for my living. And I want you to know how this is going to go. I'm not worried about the door being opened. I'm not worried about people coming in because I'm a pretty open-minded guy in the first place. I'm not a typical speaker, just so you know. You might guess that by seeing what's on stage. I'm just going to talk to you. I'm going to tell you some stories. I'm not going to challenge you to do anything. No audience participation. You're not going to have to change chairs and talk to someone you've never met. You're not going to have to kind of come up with a group discussion. And you've heard of the trust exercise, where someone comes up on stage, they fall back, the speaker catches them. That's not going to happen. In fact, the only thing that I want you to appreciate off the very beginning of my show is something that's guaranteed, I'm pretty sure of this, that you've never seen anything like this in your life before. I'm going to sit on this stool and I'm going to play this here drum, and I don't want to explain it to you because this is part of the storytelling, okay? But this is the irony of the moment. Even if people show up half an hour late, they're not going to see this. And you got to try to describe this to them later. You should have seen this dude. He got up on stage and played the frickin' drums with his feet. There you go. You can clap for that if you like. Thank you. Now you're curious, aren't you? I hear that. That's kind of why I do that when I do that, and I will explain why I did that later on. I'm going to do some rhetorical questions with you, so you know you don't need to answer them. Do you remember your high school guidance counselor? Did you have one of those, career counselor? Someone that you went and talked to when you were back in school days? That little 15-minute block of time you had to chart the entire course of the rest of your life. Do you remember that? Okay, so I don't know if you had one or not. A lot of people don't have them. I was down in Mexico City a couple of weeks ago. I'm not trying to brag, all right? Talking to 2,500 students at an international youth symposium, and I was shocked that in Mexico, guidance counselors are not all that common, but that's okay. Why I'm asking you is, if you remember your guidance counselor, this is a show your hands question. How many of you are doing what your guidance counselor from way back when recommended that you do for a career? Show of hands. 2. 2? Okay, cool. That's actually an average number. Funniest story about that ever, I spoke to 1,500 guidance counselors at the Canadian Association of Guidance Counselors National Convention. Asked that same question. Out of an audience of 1,500 guidance counselors, 7 of them put up their hand. So am I indicting the world of guidance counseling? Clearly not. But what I can tell you is it's a fascinating thing for me to start with, okay? My guidance counselor was a man named Ken Sherwin. Ken Sherwin was also the vice principal of discipline at a place called the Yorkton Regional High School in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Okay, one more show of hands. Anybody have a clue where Yorkton, Saskatchewan actually is? 4. Good for you. Well, that's a bigger number than the people that talked about guidance counselors. Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and why that's important is everybody knows where Atlanta is, home of the Olympic Games. Calgary, where I live, home of the Calgary Olympics. By the way, anybody know if the Calgary Flames won last night? Did anybody know? Nobody knows. You don't care, do you? Hockey, it's hockey. You used to have a hockey team in Atlanta. Remember that? Anyway, the fact of the matter is, I got to tell you, Yorkton was a farming community where the dream of hitting it big was pretty uncommon, okay? It was just mindset. Wasn't a bad thing, just a mindset. Small community, 7,000 people, okay? And my reason for mentioning that Mr. Sherwin was the discipline vice principal was I never met him, because I was one of those goody kids that never got into trouble. You know what I'm talking about, right? So I went in for my little 15-minute block of time, and I will never forget that meeting as long as I live. I sat in front of his desk, and Mr. Sherwin looked at me and said, "So, I know, Mr. Law, that, when it comes to your future plans, it's pretty clear what you want to do." Exactly. I want to be a rock star. Now, you can believe that I had the credibility to be a rock star, right? You should see me play the whole set. And that's why I did it off the beginning, not because I was trying to amaze you, but it just goes to show you, and we will talk about this morning, that first impressions sometimes don't mean a thing. We'll talk about that later. But because you don't know me, that's why I'm explaining this. Because you can imagine that though I have no arms, this is not a unique situation, I am a foot user. Therefore, you also know that I have kind of a hidden talent that people don't think of when they first see me. But Mr. Sherwin knew me. So Mr. Sherwin could get in my head. And he said, "As good as you are at playing those drums, young man, I think you need a plan B. I think you need to consider what else you could do with your future, because music is so unpredictable. And to be honest, young man, the world of professional music is very, very uncaring, very unsympathetic. Can you play? That's all they care about." I thought I could play, but I wasn't seeing the big picture because I was 17 years old, right? So I said, "What do you think? What would be your suggestion?" Alvin, he says, "This is your thought. What would you do if you did not play music?" Ladies and gentlemen, I swear to God, I said, "How about dentistry?" Can you imagine? Open wider. I don't think so. So Mr. Sherwin looked at me and said, "Are you trying to be funny?" And I went, "Trying." And he said, "Mr. Law, if anybody understands this with your life story, life isn't funny." Right. It isn't always funny, is it? "Okay, Mr. Sherwin, have you got a surprise for me? What am I here for?" He says, "I think you should be a broadcaster." "A broadcaster?" "Yeah, like on television broadcaster?" He goes, "No, you're kind of ugly for television." This was 1977. We weren't politically correct yet, right? But he says, "You could be on radio." Radio. Now, I don't know. I'm looking at your faces. I can actually see you. That's a good thing. The light's not too bright. I'm guessing you're all of an age when you remember when they actually played vinyl records on the radio, when it wasn't playlists, when it wasn't computer-driven, and when there were actual DJs that entertained rather than just were like robotic voices. Remember that? So that's what I had. My head was imagining it, because I used to go to the big cities for a reason I will explain a little bit later. And the only thing that I ever remember enjoying was I got to take my little portable radio and I would try to find a radio station that would make me feel at home, okay? So that's what I thought. I'd love that. How do I do that? You can go to school for that. You can go to school for broadcasting? Yes, you can. So off I went, 1978. I went to Mount Royal College in Calgary, where I now live. I've moved away since then and then come back. But Mount Royal is actually now a university. Talk about setting goals. And I remember getting there in 1978, graduating in 1980, getting a job 9 days after I graduated. Hard to believe, huh? And my perfect job. I was an all-night disc jockey at an FM radio station in a place called Regina. It's okay to giggle. I get the joke. okay? I remember the first time I actually said that, and Canadians, we know, I just pronounced it correct, didn't I? First time I said that word, I was in Baltimore at the beginning of my speaking career back in the 80s at an all-black high school, and the only reason that's important to tell you is in case you didn't notice, I'm not. And I felt extremely uncomfortable because I'd never been to an all-black high school. So my brain was playing games with me like it does with people, right? So I got up in front of all these teenagers and said, "Hi, my name is Alvin, and I'm from Regina." And the kid in the front row went, "Aren't we all, brother?" I actually didn't get the joke. I had to think about it for a while. But laugh if you like, it is funny. Everybody does it, especially in America. But it is pronounced Regina. You might call it Regina because of the vacuum cleaner company. But it is in respect, obviously the name it's also called the Queen City. So it's obviously Latin for queen. Anyway, I worked at an FM station in Regina, and it was a very different time in my life. This was my voice. Doesn't it sound cool? I thought that's what it was. I did not know the truth. I just thought about it because I wanted to be cool. And I actually thought this was the perfect job. Rock music, right? That voice. You're listening to FM 92, the rock of Regina. Get it? And I looked like a rock star. I had big hair. I was about 35 pounds lighter, and I had this big hair. I don't know what I was going for. I kind of looked like a Pez dispenser. Anyway, I was trying to go cool, but I got to tell you, there was something going on here that at 20 years old, in this case, I did not grasp. I'll get there later too. But then came this incredible day. I don't know that it was one of those meant-to-be stories. I really don't know, because I still haven't decided if things are meant to be. I'm not sure about it. I think it's a really good idea. There's a lot of people that believe in the idea that we follow our life path, and too many people ignore the obvious signs, yada, yada, yada. All I know is I went into my boss's office one morning, and I thought I was in trouble. He says, "You're not in trouble. Your show is so popular, Alvin, that you are going to represent the radio station at a junior high school career symposium for all the junior high school students in town." Wow, what am I going to talk about? The radio business. Jeez, I'd never done a speech. What was I going to do? So how do I do this? He goes, "Just go. Take the van." Oh, it was so cool. I got to take the Rock 92 van. Remember when they had those vans with the painting on the side and the carpet inside that was like the stuff from your green living rooms? Anyway, I remember it was such a neat event. Wore my Rock 92 jacket, handed out Rock 92 stickers, got up in front of about 150 seventh graders in my room and talked about the radio business. And they're all looking at me. And obviously, there's a celebrity in the house. That's what the look was like. You know that look you get when you spot a celebrity? It's like, oh, well, that's what I thought it was. So I'm kind of looking at them and going, "Oh, by the way, boys and girls, I've never done this. So if you have any questions, I guess just put up your hand." Every kid in the room put up their hand. So I didn't know what to do. First timer, right? I acknowledged the young man in the front row. I can't point. "Yes, young man, you have a question." He stood up and said, How do you go to the bathroom?" What? "How do you go to the bathroom?" Okay, that wasn't a broadcasting question. It was a pretty good question, huh? I dare you to get it out of your head for the next hour. That's a funny joke, isn't it? Yeah. So what did I do? What I did was really, in this case, I believe meant to be. I just happened to be in a room where there was a set of drums. And I was 20 years old. And I wasn't refined wine yet, you know? So I didn't know what to do. I said, I don't think I can answer that question, young man. I mean, I'm sorry, it's very personal. But, I want to show you something. So I went over to a set of drums. And I sat behind the drums. And I said, "Do me a favor, boys and girls, close your eyes." And went, "What?" "Close your eyes." And then I played an entire drum set. And then I got them to open their eyes. And when I was done, I had invented my first ever creative experience with impressions. Because I asked them why they were so curious, I get. But what did they really want to hear from me that day? Did they want to hear about the radio business, or were they just dying to hear stories about how it must be to have no arms? And is it ironic that that was not my plan? I didn't plan to spend my entire life talking about having no arms. Can you imagine? How many times I've had that question? What happened to you? Can you imagine how long ago I got tired of that? I'm not narcissistic, but it was at that moment in time I realized I was getting a message from whatever powers you believe in that said, young man, you are not going to be a DJ. You are going to be a life changer. You're going to be one of those people that everybody remembers for making an imprint on society that could have been a really negative one, but you're going to change that. That's what my heart was telling me. And I thought it was crazy. At 58 years old, I don't think it's crazy. But when you're young, when you're impressionable, and especially when, in my case, you're immature, you don't always have a lot of dark philosophical thoughts, huh? Well, we're going to talk about some dark philosophical thoughts today. I think that's part of your scheme, too, part of your gig. I've been watching all the quotes when I was waiting for you to show up. And I got to tell you, sometimes those things can be a bit cynical for our society. So we're just gonna talk. I'm gonna tell you some stories. There's no pattern. I'm not gonna tell you, and I'm gonna tell you, and then tell you, and then tell you what I told you, and we're not gonna cover every section. I mean, I know speakers do that. I don't do that. I just, I start with stuff. Okay, here's another good example of my style. What did happen to me? I've got a website. I want you to make sure you remember my website. This is not a commercial. It's just alvinlaw.com. alvinlaw.com. On the website, on the top of my main page, which, by the way, apparently is going to be changing again soon. I don't run my tech department. There's a thing called Change the Label. Change the Label is from a company called Goalcast. If you do not subscribe to Goalcast, Goalcast, I get no money from this. It is a company that produces and sends out inspirational videos pretty much every day to your Facebook account. I think there's other social media platforms, but Facebook is the big one. I have a Goalcast video that I did not have anything to do with that last count had 31.4 million views on Facebook. Now, why I'm mentioning that is not to brag. In fact, to be quite blunt, I can't believe I've got 31.5 million views on Facebook, because I really don't know what I've done that apparently is so inspiring, and I mean that. I'm not trying to be humble, yet I understand it on an intellectual level, but what catches my attention every time I look at that and why I'm mentioning it is change the label. So I was at an event. Boys and Girls Club, you know what those are? Boys and Girls Club. Speaking in Kelowna, British Columbia, in the Okanagan Valley, for a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club. And of course, what I was there to talk about was indeed my story of life without arms, overcoming challenges, all the things that I went through, yada, yada, yada. And when I referenced that point to the young people that go to Boys and Girls Clubs for various reasons, but if we want to all acknowledge, they tend to have challenged lives themselves. Yeah? So I just wanted to say, look, when you're raising money for a cause like this, because you obviously heard I'm a fundraiser too, don't do it out of sympathy. Do it in the knowledge that you can actually change a person's future by changing the label they've placed on themselves. See, labels are everywhere, aren't they? Especially in America. With due respect, it's kind of a Western thing, but I think it's very, very prevalent. What's your label? Have you ever thought about that? How do you describe yourself? So here's mine, and I bet you, unlike 95% of my audiences, because you have a medical background, so to speak, you're going to probably know what this is. I am a thalidomide baby. Thalidomide. Now, if you don't know what I just said because you've just never heard of it, that's cool. Most people today have not. Thalidomide would be the answer technically to the question, what happened to me? That would be the technical answer because it's technically correct. Thalidomide was a morning sickness medication that was given to pregnant women in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and it deformed the babies. About 20,000, that was the acknowledged number around the world. America was not affected by thalidomide. There's a lot of conjecture about this, but now we're going to hear a fact. This is an absolute fact. 23 thalidomiders born in the United States because the FDA never approved the drug for use. Because a Canadian doctor, first day on the job at the FDA, a female, please keep this one in mind. In 1959, her name was Dr. Florence Kelsey. She was from Cobble Hill, British Columbia, little tiny town. Can you imagine a woman doctor at the FDA in 1959? And this big drug company out of Germany called Grunenthal came along and said, rubber stamp this, honey, in those words. And she said in her own words, I won't tell you the actual words, screw you. And she got very aggressive looking at the materials. And everything she looked at said, I'm not going to just brush this over. And look what happened. She never did allow it to be licensed. And she was actually the only Canadian to ever be given the Presidential Award of Freedom by President Kennedy in 1962. Lord knows, let's be blunt, what would have happened in the pharmaceutically addicted United States of America. Point is that drug was terrible. And you can tell by my change of body language and voice that I'm not acknowledging it was terrible. You ready to go a little bit deeper into the negativity? I'm just preparing you because I guarantee you've never heard this. Thalidomide was invented at Auschwitz. Did you know that? It was the sedative they used to calm the people down, you could call them prisoners, before they put them to death. This is a fact. The German doctor who was in charge of the thalidomide project went on to start a company called Grunenthal. And Grunenthal was given a license to produce thalidomide in Germany, where 8,000 babies were born in a 2.5-year period with everything from a couple of missing fingers to all 4 limbs gone. And nobody blew a whistle. Then it hit England, I guess, the order doesn't matter, France, Belgium, Sweden, all the European countries. It somehow ended up over in Australia. They tried to bring it here. They brought it to Canada. Here is my point. Can you imagine the dark legacy that came out of that drug? And try to imagine how there could possibly be anything I could say about it today that would be good. Well, you're probably thinking ahead of me because you're looking at me going, well, look what happened to you. Got it. I'll get there later. But here's I love this example. I hope you don't mind. These are long stories, some of them, and some of them are really short. We'll see how things go today. 1996, I am hosting a telethon in Vancouver, British Columbia for a charitable organization called Variety Club. Variety Club, of course, if you don't know this, is a musicians and entertainers charity. And one of the largest that they try to support around the world is children with disabilities, special needs stories. Being a pretty inventive entertainer myself, I started doing telethons, which is how I ended up with all that money on my resume. Not because I went out making phone calls, but because I was part of projects that raised money. And I'm very proud of that. I'd use my drumming ability, I'd wow the audience, and then I'd get up there and say, look what's possible if we can just help this organization thrive and do its best for the people. You get it, it's all pretty predictable stuff. And television is a great vehicle for that, but some people do not like telethons. They sound patronizing, they sound a little bit politically incorrect. The Jerry Lewis telethon is a perfect example of that. I think Jerry Lewis himself was probably a pretty cool guy, but sometimes the sympathy element was a little much, and I acknowledge that. But it's hard, because how do you tell a negative story in a positive way, right? You get it? So we're on stage, we're interviewing this family. I am not doing the interview because, of course, it would be uncomfortable for anybody to do an interview while I'm holding a microphone in their face. So we have another person who is a journalist asking the tough questions. And here is the scenario. There's a family on stage. There's a mom and a dad. The mom is doing all the talking. There's a little boy who's 8, and there's a little girl who's 5. The little girl has 5 tumors on her spine, and she's simply going to die. They think she probably will die with a severe epileptic seizure, which she's also having for reasons I was not explained. So what the telethon was going to do when this terrible scene was over, talking about this sad story, Variety was going to give this little girl a very early edition of a service dog, an epileptic seizure dog, named Variety. And boy, was it a cute dog. So it was going to be a great television moment. I know what you're thinking. Let me go on. And we're all up on stage, and this interviewer is talking about the story and what's going on and the cancer and the sadness. And I could sense this was going south real fast because it was such a bleak moment, right? So I interrupted the journalist, and he kind of gave me a dirty look, and I said, sorry, can I ask a question? And I called her Mom. I said, Mom, are you glad to be here? Sensing what the audience is thinking. She goes, no, I hate being here. You mean on stage? She goes, definitely on stage. On television? Absolutely on television. What do you mean? She says, I just hate to have to be here at all. I wish my daughter wouldn't have got sick. I wish she wouldn't have got an illness that we couldn't fix. I wish that we wouldn't have had to go to Variety Club and ask for assistance because we needed an experimental medication that might help her a little bit. I wish I wasn't here at all, Mr. Law, but that's why I'm here, because one day everything's good, and the next day we're here. It happens to people. And then she looks at the television as if like we made her do this. And she goes, people at home, please phone in because we need to help Variety. Mr. Law, did you know that the drug my daughter is on to help her is worth $20,000 a month? Really? Yeah. And it's actually showing some signs that it might be working. Really? Yeah. And you know the name of the drug, Mr. Law? No, tell me. Thalidomide. Today, Janice is 29 years old. She's married, and she has variety number 5. She still has epilepsy, but the tumors are gone. Did you know that thalidomide is the only known treatment for multiple myeloma? And it is still being used as one of the only treatments for leprosy. My point is this. Every story has two sides. Every belief has two sides. Every opinion has two sides. And I got to tell you, that might sound really obvious, but I can't explain any more than the obvious of how that changed my life, okay? So, how did I do all this? How did I learn to play drums with my feet? How did I learn to do what I get to do every single day like this? Oh, that's part of the story I'm going to tell you, okay? But it's not my story. See, I didn't know this either. I didn't acknowledge this. Oh, by the way, there was another thing they called us, another label I got. Thalidomide victim. Okay, you know from your profession, specifically, there is damage done to a body. And there are accidents, and there are incidences, and there are victims. Correct? Let's just acknowledge they exist. But I find it interesting because even the word bugs me. Well, I'm a victim. Well, there's your first problem right there. That's how I see it. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying you may be thinking someone different and you're right. You know what I mean? See what about the two things at the same time? It's just that's how I've learned to believe. Now, did I believe I was a victim? Absolutely. Especially when I was a teenager, right? Adolescence. Isn't that a fun thing to go through? And I got to tell you, I was not a good adolescent. Because you see, all I knew was that I had these skilled feet. But I was shallow. Yeah, weren't we all? Okay, I was worried too much about things that didn't matter. Dating. I remember worrying about dating all the time, right? What do you do when you go out on a date? You hold hands. Well, that never happened to me, you can imagine, so it made me lonely. I didn't have a million friends because I wasn't popular. I was spending all my time sitting in the basement playing my drums. I was a bit isolated. But I also did not feel comfortable in my skin. And I also noticed that when I played the victim card, I got stuff. So I was pretty good at that act. But I didn't truly understand what thalidomide itself meant until August 23rd, 1985. 10:53 in the morning precisely. I'll always remember. This is a cheap one, okay? Just so you know, ahead of time. That's the moment my son Vance was born. So yes, I'm also a dad. Don't try to figure out how that happened. Just go with it, okay? Obviously, I got someone to hold this and the other fun bits. Anyway. Well, come on, life's about the fun bits, isn't it? Anyway, I'm giggling because every time I tell this story, I'm never sure how the audience is going to take it, so I'm just going to tell it, okay? I'm in the operating room in Regina, watching my son being born, and I'm having a flashback to junior high school health class. Do you remember that health class? Ours, in this case, a nurse came to our school. We were in 7th grade. How mature were we? And she got up in front of us in a nurse's outfit and started talking about babies. Do you remember that? Did ever that happen? I mean, I remember sitting in my desk going, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this. And please don't show any pictures. I don't want to talk about this. And she's saying, I remember the two things she said. Childbirth is the most beautiful shared human experience. No, it's not. No. There's no sharing going on. I love this guy. Guys go, oh, we're helping you breathe. No, you're not. You're just watching and videotaping. That's all you're doing. Breathe, breathe, breathe. What does that do? When babies are born, they're beautiful. No, they're not. They're covered in goo. It's disgusting, isn't it? So, sorry, but this is exactly what happened. They're holding up my kid by the heels. He's dripping on the floor. I'm actually watching the little drips instead of looking at him. And the nurse finally knocks me out of my little moment of comatose and says, oh, excuse me, Mr. Law. This is typically where the dads cut the umbilical cord. And I said, they don't really let me play with scissors. Anyway, so the nurse came over, they cut the cord, they tied the knot. I don't know how they do that. That sucker's slippery. And they put him in a bath, and they got rid of the goo, and they brought him over to me, and they gave me a chair. I sat in the chair, and they put him here. He fit here. This is the perfect viewpoint of a human being. We are ultimately helpless, aren't we? At the end of the day, this is the perfect example of it. Isn't it ironic? This is an obvious one, a very obvious one. We start out helpless, we end up helpless. And somewhere in between, we figure out what works for us. And there's no magic formula. You know, I got to tell you, it kills me. I travel the world saying things like what? It's better to have a positive attitude than a negative one. I mean, duh, even stupid people know that. It's not about positive versus negative, isn't it? It's about a little more than that. Anyway, that's a moment, isn't it? If you had that moment, if you haven't had that moment, I apologize, but it's quite the moment, isn't it? Especially the first time, first baby, huh? Count the fingers, count the toes, make sure the baby's perfect, and then they're not. That's what I was thinking. I'd never thought about it. Honest to God, I'd never thought about this. I'd never thought about this idea. I wonder how my mom and dad must have felt the first time they held me. See, they called the babies the thalidomide victims. I disagree. I think the moms were the victims. Because the moms were given a medication by a doctor who was told it was safe because a drug company was lying, because a drug company cared more about profit than it did about health and safety. Now, has that changed? A little bit, yeah, a little bit. No, I don't mind you vocalizing, I don't mind. In fact, I work on occasion, not very often, I don't think they like me very much, with pharmaceutical companies. Actually, pharmaceutical companies have me wrong. They think that I'm angry with the pharmaceutical company. I'm not. I have nothing against the pharmaceutical company that so theoretically did this to me, because that's not the point. That's why I talk about the moms. And then it hit me. This is personal, obviously. My mom was 55 years old the first time she held me, and my dad was 53 years old, and I was homeless. That is a factoid, not a melodramatic moment. Now, was my family homeless? Was that their life? No. Did they die? No. No, on the 5th day of my life, they met with experts who predicted that I would have zero quality of life, no independence, and that I would have to be cared for the rest of my natural life. And that, well, obviously that was inaccurate, but that was the thinking of the time, wasn't it? And my birth family were not intellectual. They did not have the wherewithal to consider what could possibly be a success story, because they were too busy living in the middle of 1960. And the value that we gave people with disability, which, if you don't remember and acknowledge, was also zero. Right? Wouldn't you agree with that? If you had a handicap, that's terrible, worst thing that could ever happen. I understand that was 1960. So you can imagine what saved my story, and again, please don't take this the wrong way, but I lived in Canada, where we have that evil thing called universal health care, which meant that I could be inserted into the healthcare system, and my parents could go away from the hospital knowing that I would be cared for, no questions asked. So they signed some papers, made me what's called a ward of the government of Saskatchewan, and that's where I ended up. Until a woman named Hilda Law came along, because she had a foster home in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and her gig was to take care of the ones that other ones didn't want, so she took me home. And her basic belief system, but more than anything, her personality type is, I believe, what drove what you're seeing today. So I want to talk about her for a little bit. I kind of call my mom my first CEO. Do you know what I mean by that? She was my first example of the boss and her leadership style. Mom wouldn't have thought of it this way. In fact, if Mom knew I was talking about this, she'd be smacking me in the head like she was so good at doing. That's where I got it, on the back of the head. Did you ever get one of those? I got lots. Didn't hurt, just woke me up. Got spanked a lot. No, we weren't supposed to do that now anymore, but I understand. I'm just telling you, my mom was a tough lady. But more than anything, my mom understood she was put into a position where this was not going to be an anonymous hidden child. Would you agree? I kind of stick out. And the point of that story is that's huge in my development. See, the thalidomide babies were an embarrassment. The moms felt guilty. They didn't want to acknowledge the fact that this was their fault. In their hearts, they believed it. So there was a conflict. But they certainly did not have the wherewithal, that's a big word again, to believe in something that my mother, because she was a foster mom, had in her cultural awareness system. Do you know what I mean by that? She saw lots of abused kids. Lots of children that were treated like you can't believe that you probably know your own stories. So Mom didn't judge. Dad didn't judge. They just said, come on, live here until you're better, and then we'll send you off somewhere else where you can live the rest of your life. And sometimes they went back to their original homes. Sometimes they went to other foster homes. Sometimes they went to permanent homes. All I know is I never left. And my mom was forced to become famous. It's funny, isn't it? Celebrity, what that looks like. Do you recognize me? Probably not. In fact, Jill and I were talking about this, that, I don't know, would a Kardashian being here this morning have filled the room? Maybe, but you wouldn't have learned a single thing except she's an idiot. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, I'm not a big celebrity. And I'll acknowledge that, but I am a celebrity. In Saskatchewan, all right? That's like being famous in Iowa. It's really easy. So I was famous in Saskatchewan, and not because I've done telethons, and not because I played the drums with my feet. That came later. I actually got famous in December of 1961. I keep giggling because this story, I know, maybe I should just leave Regina alone, but there's that Regina again. The Regina Leader-Post was the biggest newspaper in the province of Saskatchewan, came out of the big city, right? 2 hours away from Yorkton. And they were starting to write a story, a feature article on this evil drug coming out of Germany. See, there was another baby born in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, which is 3 hours away from Yorkton. There was another baby born in northern Saskatchewan, a place called Saskatoon. Then there was another baby they heard about in Alberta. And this was just slow news feed, right? Because this was 1960, 61. But then the news stories were coming out of Germany. The drug had been revealed. It was banned by 1962. So it was hot news. Not to mention the pharmaceutical scandal that was going with this, right? So the Regina Leader-Post decided, hey, let's write a story about that kid in Yorkton, 2 hours away. Why not? You know what they actually called me? A sighting. They spotted one. So they came to Yorkton. They came into our house. Photographer takes this picture. It is creepy. I still have it in my scrapbook. Which, by the way, let me just go over here for a second and tell you another side story. This is how I do things. Get used to me. We're just 35 minutes away, so you'll be done with me soon. But I'm married to a... Sorry, this is where I don't know if I should ever talk about my wife because it's just cheesy as heck. I'm married to a ridiculous human being. It's ridiculous how amazing she is. I have no idea how I landed this one because I got to tell you, she could have had the pick of the litter. When I spotted her, I spotted her at a conference, okay? Not on the stage. She wasn't in the audience. It was in a hospitality room. She was one of the conference chairs. I was supposed to meet her like I met Jill last night. Supposed to go say hi. And by the way, Jill, I didn't do this when I saw you. I drooled when I saw my wife. I did. I looked at her. It's like, she said, you're drooling. I'm going, I'm not drooling. She goes, yeah, you are. You're staring too. No, I'm not staring. Yes, you are. She's so beautiful. You know, one of those people just walks through life and everybody looks at them. Yeah, me too, except for different reasons. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, when I spotted my wife, I didn't know. I was a single dad of that little boy that I talked about. Remember him? He's 33 now. Do I look old enough to have a 33-year-old kid? Say, no, Alvin, you don't. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, oh, by the way, he's fine. Sorry, I should do this. He's fine. Because people ask him, how's it feel having a dad without arms? I love his answer. It's not like I got to pick. Exactly. So, we don't always get to pick, do we? Do you know what I mean? We show up on the planet, and we get to pick a few things down the road. But I certainly didn't think I was going to get to pick this wife of mine because I didn't have a good first marriage. Maybe some of you can relate to that in the audience. My point is this. My wife and I had our 25th anniversary last July. Don't clap. But I can't believe it because she runs our business. She's so smart. She's an accountant. She's a bookkeeper, human resources expert, and a feng shui master. Do you know what feng shui is? Feng shui is the study of energy, right? Is it real? Yeah? People call it New Age. No, 6,500 years old. That's not new. So the fact of the matter is it's been around a long time. Started in Asia, the idea of studying where we can put these different zones in our homes. I don't know anything about it. I'm just telling you, I'm married to one of these people, okay? You come to our house, first thing you notice is this huge Buddha sitting on our front doorstep. And people go, are you Buddhist? No, it's Buddha, it's lovely. And then we have Bagua mirrors. They reflect negative energy from the front of your house and the back of your house. You following me? And then you walk in the house and we have a water feature. So you hear bubbling water. This is feng shui. And you go in our bathrooms, there's rocks in our sinks. People go, there's rocks in your bathroom sinks. I know, it's a feng shui thing, don't ask. All I know is that you can measure energy, and my wife's really good at it. One of the keys to feng shui is decluttering. This is my point, right? We need to keep a clutter-free area. Right? That's not just about safety and health. It's just about mind clutter. You know, kids, if they just cleaned out their lockers, just kept their rooms clean, as old school as that sounds, would declutter their brains. Anyway, I digress. The fact of the matter is that I have this scrapbook is incredible. You get my point? That I have anything that I've tried to keep is incredible. So you go in my scrapbook, and the first picture you see is me on the front cover of the Regina Leader Post, wearing nothing because I'm naked. But they had a little tiny diaper covering my privates and a black photographic bar across my eyes so nobody would recognize who I actually was. So then the reporter sits on our couch and he's just looking. Finally, my mom goes, are you going to ask a question or something? I'm sorry, Mrs. Law, I'm having a really hard time not looking at him. Yeah, I know he's adorable, isn't he? She said. Isn't that cute? But isn't it fascinating? Because that's what my mom literally saw. See how lucky I was? How lucky was I to end up in a home like that? And the reporter goes, adorable? Yeah. Come on, you're just saying that, aren't you? Because you're his foster mom? He's not adorable. Look at that. Sorry, sir, what do you mean? Well, Mrs. Law, this is tragedy. This is real life tragedy. Look at that poor little boy and what he's going to go through. Mom says, you don't know that. And he looks at her and he says, well, what do you know? She goes, I'm a person of faith. So all I know is he didn't end up in this home by accident. And I'm going to make sure that he turns out okay, no matter what it takes. Well, how are you going to do that? I've already got a head start. What's that? Oh, he's starting to use his toes for fingers and his feet for hands. How'd you teach him that? He taught us. He's a baby. Baby teaches lots. You just have to pay attention. I walked in his room one morning. He was dangling his favorite teddy bear between his first and second toe by its left ear. So what'd you do? Poor said. Mom said, I stared. What do you think I did? Weirdest looking thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So let's just get this out of the way real quick here. I look odd. This is what it looks like. Oh, by the way, that was also an excuse to get rid of that jacket. Oh my God, humidity down here? Yikes. But this is what it looks like. Now, again, odd crowd. Not you, odd, but unusual, in that your medical background means you've probably seen this, right? But imagine how many audiences I go to where when they look at this, it's like, oh, and I understand that. Because we're a very, very physical-oriented society, which is sort of ironic that I'm talking to you, huh? But let me just say this, I hope I don't offend anybody. We're a little weird about body perfect, aren't we? Ladies, got to be the right weight. Sorry, I'm not trying to slag Kim Kardashian, but what does she actually do? See what I mean? People say, I want to be Kim Kardashian. Why? Why? I am pretty funny about this subject because it's been on my mind for my entire life. Why am I not masculine? But I had that to deal with, you see? Because that's why I find it funny when I look at my wife and I go, my God, she's still beautiful. You should see her. She's going to be 60 this summer. She looks 30. She runs every day, 5K, every day. Walks our dog, 5K, every day. How did I marry someone like that? Oh my God, did I ever hit the jackpot? Why'd she marry me? I don't think it was the biceps. Can you feel my energy? This is a direct descendant of Hilda Law. If you met my mom, I can guarantee you one thing would happen. You'd follow her around like a puppy dog because you want more of Hilda Law. Why is that? Because people have energy in their bodies. And it emanates from the electrons. You know all this stuff, don't you? All the little movement in our insides, the little parts we never see except under a microscope. All the energy zones, all of that power that we own. It's there, isn't it? That's why I think it's fascinating. That's why when people stare at me, I'm not offended. Because I know what I can do to change that stare real fast. And then this is my life education. It started with little kids. Little kids, everybody stares. But little kids, you can't get mad at, right? Because they're not trying to be rude. They're just being little kids. Oh, God, the first time I went to an elementary school, kindergarten class is in the front row. 5 minutes in my program, never seen this before. The entire kindergarten class pulls their arms inside their shirts, looks up at the stage and goes, what's that all about? I thought it was like an 80s thing, okay? By the way, tiny little segue just for your benefit so you don't get lost in my story. I eventually quit my radio job because the International Year of Disabled Persons came along in 1981, and it opened a portal that I went through. That's why it's that long that I've been on stage, okay? Just started doing things as part of my radio job, representing the year, talked about disability awareness, and then realized that I needed to do something more influential in my life. But here's one more little gem before I go on. I know now what I was hiding. Me. See, I was in a booth with a microphone and a piece of glass, and that was my audience. Nobody stared. Nobody looked at me. Nobody asked dumb questions. And I could sound cool. Until I realized I was hiding from myself. Yes? So when I got out on stage and started doing my thing, I realized not only was I fulfilling my dream of being a rock star, kinda, but more than anything, what I was doing was making my story matter for something. That's cheesy. I get it. But that's what my mom and I agreed on when I got older and I started talking about doing it. She goes, you're not going to talk about me, are you? Yeah. Mom was so humble, it was ridiculous. I said, I have to talk about you, Mom, because you did this to me. Your energy did this to me. You know how I started speaking? People say, when did you start talking? I said, apparently 1963. What? Yeah, because people would come up to my mom and go, what happened to your little boy? And she'd say, ask him, he's not an idiot. And that's how I started explaining this to people. So it's been my whole life, right? But the little kid thing I'm fascinated by. I thought that was an 81 thing because it was a long time ago. And then I thought it was like a Saskatchewan thing because it's a small province. And then I went to Alberta, they did it there. Well, I thought it was there. Then they did it all across Canada. I thought it was a Canadian thing. I don't know why. And then I came to America, they did it down here. And then I went to all these other countries, Australia, Asia. I was in Uganda a couple of years ago. Front row, 5 minutes into my show, all the little kids pulled their arms inside their shirts and did the same thing. And I'm thinking, this is, oh my God, this was so meaningful to me. This was powerful. We're all children of planet Earth. Did you notice this? Sorry, I'm going to be a little bit, I keep saying sorry. I hate to do that. I just don't want to offend anybody. Have we missed the storyline that's going on in Mozambique? The cyclone that hit there? Thousands of people are dead. Have you been following the news on that? No, because we're too busy watching politics. We're too busy watching talking heads. We don't value the life of those people over there like we do value our own neighborhoods, do we? Sorry, this is just a real problem for me. Because I've been around the planet and I've met the value of all humanity. Black, white, English, not English, religious, not religious. Look, why am I saying this? Why am I so aggressive about it? Because we need to open our minds, people. We need to understand that every human being has inherent value. And by understanding that, we then raise the bar for our society. And I know where I am. I know there's a lot of Trump supporters down here, but I'm offended by him. When he made fun of the cerebral palsy reporter for the New York Times, and you might think he made that up, I watched it happen. It bothered me. Leaders don't make fun of people. Leaders set the example. And I'm not against Trump. Just telling you, it's a weird country. Your country's weird. I love Canada. Come visit. Do you know we just legalized marijuana? That's cool. I'm sorry. I'm not advocating marijuana. I'm just saying, where would I rather live? Down here with Mr. Trump or smoking a joint with Mr. Trudeau? I'm just thinking. You know what I mean? Just thinking. Oh, and by the way, while we're on the topic, my wife has not slept most of her adult life because of endometriosis and woman stuff until she started using CBD oil and stopped going to the doctor to get pharmaceutical replacements, opioids that kill thousands every day with addiction. Sorry, see, these are platforms I could talk about, each one of them forever, because this is about our fabric of our society. That's what I love about being with people like you, because you can learn how to twist or do this or torque that, but what you're actually learning is the value of the philosophical side of life, what makes people tick, the heart of a human being, right? Aren't you? Isn't that what you do? So I don't have to tell you that because you already know it, but I want to affirm it because it matters. Oh, by the way, old people stare too. I have a theory about this. I think little kids stare because they haven't learned manners, and old people stare because they quit them. Do you know any old people like that? Just old farts that say whatever's on their mind, lost the filter. Ugh. My wife and I were in an antique store one day. These old guys are following me around. I know they're looking at me because every time I look at them, they pretend to be looking at something else. Came around a corner, there's a pair of mannequin arms sitting on a bookshelf. So I grab it under my chin because that's how I carry stuff, and I shout it at my wife, "Darlene, I may have found them." Now, I know that's a silly comment and it's meant to be funny, but the fact of the matter is that's another thing that's followed me around. They ask me, "Don't you miss your arms?" No, they never grew. So here's a very, very important point after a long diatribe and a little bit of politics. Do you live in gratitude? Because I sure do. When you got no arms, you kind of learn to value the stuff you got. And you don't take anything for granted, like ever. Now, I'm not bragging and I'm not trying to sound like I'm pompous. But you understand why I'm saying this? My mom did not act like there was something wrong with me. The doctors did. The medical community did. All the people in rehabilitation did. I had artificial arms for 13 years. Had to go to hospitals every year, sometimes up to 6 weeks at a time, because they were trying to help me understand how I could be fixed. And in my heart and in my brain, I said, no, I'm already perfect. Isn't that fascinating? But the world just didn't see it that way. There was a school right across the street from our house in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, called St. Alphonsus Elementary School. It was right across the street. Can you imagine how lucky I was that I got to go to school? And I'd already learned to use my feet. Because what the reporter, last story about the reporter said, so when you were done staring at this little boy, and like I did, what did you do? She said, we just started focusing on those. If we could simply make those into something that he could use, we would actually have a head start. But since she had no idea what she was doing, I don't mean that to be derogatory, my mother was not a nurse or a therapist. My mother never even finished 7th grade. But my mother was a remarkable woman with a remarkable imagination and resiliency out every orifice. You know, every mom was just so resilient because her husband, dad, and I had been through so much. They got married in 1930. They went through the Depression. Had my brother John in 1932. My brother Terry in 1938. Dad went and fought in World War II, the real one. Came over, came home, came back with medals on his chest and stories he never talked about. PTSD, a subject we need to talk about because it's not weakness, strength. See what I mean? There's a million topics. Mental health, big subject. What's our mental health all about? Talk about that. See, these are all things that are on the radar screen when you're Alvin Law. And they all matter. But what I like to think of at the end of the day is, how about we just reduce this a little bit and keep things a little bit more simple? Mom's favorite story. I didn't have a handle on my baby bottle. This is pretty cool, isn't it? Mom decided one day to put my baby bottle in my crib, lay me on my side, put the bottle in my mouth. Her theory was that if I could drink out of that by myself, I would start to get a sense of my own subliminal independence. Does that make sense? But the experiment didn't work because I rolled over from the bottle. When I lay on my side, I almost automatically roll over. Can you imagine that? I'm really good at rolling over. You know the game little kids play? Rolling down hills? I was awesome at that game. But Mom was not a giver-upper because she was resilient, because she went through the stuff she went through. Therefore, challenge, what was that? She put the bottle back on the pillow, and I rolled over. The bottle back on the pillow, and I rolled over. You get the point. This is day after day after day. On a Friday morning, she comes into my room. I'm sitting up in the corner. I have the bottle between my feet. I'm sucking away, having a great time. So you can imagine even Mom got curious. She took me out of my crib. She put me on the floor. She stuck a bunch of toys in front of me and waited to see what I would do. Now, is this the toy? Actually, this is a hairbrush. I don't need a hairbrush, but when I reach up to brush my hair, am I trying to impress you? Yes. I want to leave an impression, but not the kind of impression that we talk about in the world of shallow. I have very nice clothes. I hate wearing jackets because they don't stay on my shoulders, because I don't have any. I used to wear ties all the time because I wanted to make a good impression, right? Nothing wrong with ties. Hey, Jill, I'm guessing you dress nice all the time. Takes me half an hour to put on a tie. And my wife reminds me, you could be a girl, and you'd have to do pantyhose and bras without arms. That'd mess you up, I guess. And that is exactly my point. Everybody's got something, and I'm not trying to reduce it to nothing. But I just telling you, you got to believe in what you're at this event for. I think you do. You got to believe in the outcomes of this organization because I am attracted to it too. All of the philosophical stuff, I believe in it because my mom made me believe that I could turn my feet into hands. And my so-called handicap disappeared. To me, the biggest challenge that my whole life would face is encapsulated in this next story. Don't worry, I remember the piano. So by 1966, again, being very personal now, not really much production going on for your knowledge banks, but just to tell you my story, by 1966, I was totally independent. Weird, eh? And there's a school right across the street from our house called St. Alphonsus Elementary School. So that's the next step, right? Get an education. Do some learning. Walked across the street with Mom and Dad. I need to describe him for you. My dad was 6 feet 3 inches tall. Weighed 235 pounds. He was this giant of a... My dad, you talk about masculinity index, my dad was a man. He was a man. He was one of those men, you know? Big shoulders, strong arms, very tall, very intimidating. Service manager for an international harvester truck and tractor dealership. Hey, the boss there. And Dad, oh my God, my dad was incredible. Mom was 5'2", weighed about 150 pounds most of her life. She was solid. And together as a couple, they made quite the pair. Can you imagine them? So now they take me across the street to school. Now picture one more very important element, all right? I'm 6. Which now makes Mom 61 and Dad 59. And all of the other parents of all of the other 6-year-olds, not. So walk in the school, do the little tour, check out all the nice walls. The teachers have decorated the walls. There's other parents running around. My friends are there. We go to the library to have some dainties. I had a donut. I don't know why I remember that. Oh, there's kids here. Hi, kids. How are you guys? You have an assignment today, okay? You got to go find a donut shop and put it on your big toe. And then don't tell them I told you. Anyway, donuts. I love donuts. Mom and Dad had a coffee. We had a little visit. We're all sitting around, having a nice chat. And then we go to the principal's office, and I'm in the middle chair, and my dad's there, and my mom's there. And I'm so excited. I can't wait to start school. And the principal looks at us, and he says, "You know he can't come here, right?" And my dad went, "We live across the street." "Well, Mr. Law, we know your story. Everybody in town knows you, but he can't come here." Mom went, but he needs to go to school. Where's he supposed to go? "Well, Mrs. Law, he needs to go across town to the school where kids like him go." Mom went, "Kids like who?" Principal pointed at me and said, well, crippled kids like him. Mom looked at me and looked at the principal. He's not crippled. Principal looked at my mom like there was something wrong with her too. Mrs. Law, he's got no arms. What do you call that? Mom went, Alvin. It's a good story, isn't it? Obviously, I got an education, right? Got a high school, got a guidance counselor, went to college. No, not obviously. The principal didn't laugh. He just looked at my parents and went, be that as it may, there's nothing I can do. So I hate to be presumptuous, but I'm guessing that that's not a sentence you use very much, right? There's nothing I can do. That's an excuse comment. That's a cop-out sentence. That's a quitter's line. That's a giver-upper's mantra. I don't believe in it either. But it's fascinating how that much weight of that sentence drags down our world. When's the last time you were on a customer service call? Right? See what I mean? If you can even get one. I'm sorry, but these are things that our society is really, indeed, problematic with. And I find it fascinating because I wish you could have been in that room. You understand the thing about feng shui earlier that I mentioned about energy? You should have felt the energy in that room. It was weird. I'll always remember it. I was 6, and I can still remember it. The principal just said those words, and my mom, she started to cry. I'd never seen my mom cry. I'm watching my mom cry, and I'd never seen that. And my dad is looking at my mom crying. And did I mention my dad was an ex-professional heavyweight boxing champ? I don't think I told you that. So my dad is now looking at the man, looking at my mom crying. Oh, by the way, one more thing. My mom and dad, oh my God, what a couple. Mom died in 96. And when that happened, my parents had been married for 66 years. Can you believe it? What a couple. So my dad loved my mom. And now she's crying. So she's kind of like got this tissue in her sleeve. You know, people like that. So she's kind of drying her eyes, and my dad's kind of checking her out, and I'm kind of in between, feeling really uncomfortable. So now dad's looking at the man that made mom cry, and he's kind of looking evil. And I think we have to get out of here. Mom and I are kind of looking at each other. Oh, this is not going to end well. So dad finally says, Hilda, I think you need a break. Why don't you go back to the library, get another coffee, take the boy, get him another donut. The principal and I, we're going to have a chat now. No, I don't know what went on in there, but 20 minutes later, Dad comes out, big smile. Hey, kid, you're going to school here tomorrow. I was sure my dad beat up the principal. You can clap, you bet. My dad didn't beat up the principal. My dad challenged his principles. But my dad made it personal. He looked at him and he said, I get it. People look at him and go, what possibly could come out of this? But I got to tell you, sir, I've learned some stuff. I didn't want him either. This is his mother's idea. She's the one that had the foster home idea. Can't say no to that lady. But, sir, we do live across the street. And he does need to go to school here. Because he's not meant to be crippled. Because he's not. See labels? The power of them? Yet understanding also what I think is the most important dynamic of all of this, on, again, a personal level, is even with all these amazing things that I would end up doing with my life, I was smart enough to know what I shouldn't do, and that's what changed everything. Like sports, okay? I love sports. I love hockey. That's why it's killing me to not know if my Flames won or not, but that's okay. I love hockey. I tried it once. See, my dad was not about hiding things from me. My mom neither, but my dad was the guy that kind of gave me the little boots, the little subtle, come on, kid. I couldn't play sports. I thought about soccer, and by the way, my dad was British, so he called it football. Anyway, I thought about soccer because I'd never get the penalty for touching the ball with my hands. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, I didn't play sports. I tried hockey once. My dad brought home skates. We had outdoor rinks because it's Canada, right? My dad put me on the surface of the ice. He was British, so he didn't skate, but he shoved me. And I went flying across the ice, and I hit a crack, and I landed on my face. By the way, what did my dad do? Run out into the ice, scoop me in his arms, dry my tears, and take me for an ice cream cone? My dad's leaning on the boards going, what are you doing? Right now, bleeding? Well, get off your butt. You're making a mess. I have to clean that up. That was my dad, kind of a tough guy. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, they were pushing me not in an inappropriate way, but I believe in an incredibly inspiring way. So when I realized I couldn't play sports, this was what I focused on. See, we didn't own stuff because we were poor. It's just the way it was. We didn't have a piano, so I didn't ever try a piano. Over at a friend's house one day, they had a piano. So I put my toes up on the keys, and I started to play this goofy little song. You've all heard it. Oops. Chubby toes, that happens. Let me start again. Chopsticks. You can clap for that if you like. Thank you. Okay, that was a little less enthusiastic than the drums, but I get it. That wasn't really very good. Why did I just do that? Well, because it wasn't very good, that's why I did it. I wanted to show you something that, again, is about me. Yes, I get it. It's about me, but it's really not about me. That song has been a symbol for my life because it's the first time that I did something in my life that I went, huh. Do you have one of those? Where you kind of just go, huh, I want to try that again. I want to learn more about how I do that. I want to get to be good at that. You have one of those? Doesn't have to be your job. You know, I don't know what it's like. Running maybe? Fishing? Hunting? I don't know what it is. Shopping? Whatever it is that you enjoy doing when you're not earning your money is one of those things. And that was just kind of a thing for me. I was going to school. Got to go to school, straight A's, by the way, in case you want to know. But I found a piano and played that song, and I'm kind of going, huh. And while I'm doing the I hear my mom come racing down to the basement where the piano was. They were playing cards with a friend. Was that you? My mom said, gave the standard 10-year-old answer, do you see anybody else down here? And then she made me play it again, and then she took me on the Yorkton, Saskatchewan elderly women's tea party circuit. It was one of the best gigs I've ever had in my entire life. Like, thanks for having me here, everybody, but playing for those women, oh my God, grandmas, there's grandmas in the room, isn't there? Oh, I love grandmas. Grandmas are something about a grandma. They would cry when I'd play chopsticks. Really? They'd clap, they'd give me milk and cookies, they'd give me grandma hugs and grandma kisses. You know, the kind that leave the lipstick stain for like a week. I'm still wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and the smell of Chanel No. 5 in my head. Those women, but they made me, that's why the piano was a symbol, they made me dream. That's huge, isn't it? For anything. Dreaming. Yeah. Can I tell you a good thing about Donald Trump? Well, I brought him down for a little bit there. Got to admire anybody that stands up and says they want to make something great again. Which, by the way, can I just be honest with you? I don't think America was ever bad. But that's politics. No, I admire anybody with a vision. Anybody with a belief that you can raise the bar. We can put in all the cliches you want right now because they all fit, don't they? Because they do fit. Because they work. And positive, negative energy. My God, I played for those ladies for 6 months. I started believing I was bulletproof. And I went into a lady's kitchen one day, and I'm just having a great day. And she says, show me your foot. I love my feet. By the way, you get this, right? Because you're not only intelligent medical people, but you're people that are smart. These are my hands. You understand that. I wear a watch on my ankle. This isn't a fashion statement. If I have an itch, right? If I want to think. If I want to point. If I want to reach across the table and hold my beautiful wife Darlene's hand. When I say I'm blessed, is that like too much? Because that's what I am. But not just in a religious fashion. In every possible, conceivable way, my life has been touched. Because I've allowed the doors to be open to it. By giving out my energy, people know they can get close to me. They can know me better. They can ask questions. And we can learn together, not because I know everything. But I admire anybody who does that, who makes people feel comfortable in their space. And that's something you can't learn in a course. You just got to work at it and practice it. And the lady in the kitchen wasn't a horrible human being. And the one, when she saw my foot, she wasn't a mean person, although she sounded mean. You ever get around someone for 30 seconds, it was 25 seconds too long? Yeah, because they got nothing good to say about it. This was one of those ladies. I said, what do you want to see my foot for? She says, because I'm a piano teacher, and your mother wants me to give you lessons. And I'd love to, except I just can't do it, Alvin. I can't see the point. You're inspiring and courageous and et cetera, but Alvin, look how short your toes are. You're never going to play music. So I believed her, because we believe experts. But we also assume every expert is qualified to give an opinion that's accurate. I guess that's a theory, but I think the problem with that is there's so many opinions. You're here for a lot of learning. I know you probably know a lot of the stuff you're going to go to, but I applaud anybody who decides they want to spend a couple of days trying to raise their own personal and professional bar. So good for you. I got 2 more stories and then I'm going to shut up. This is my favorite story. I want you to fast forward a year. We're going to be doing that video in about 2 minutes, gentlemen. I want you to fast forward a year to 1971. My mom gets a phone call that goes exactly like this. I want you to picture the call in real time. Can you do this? In real time. 1971. Ring, ring, ring. Hello, Mrs. Law. My name is Blaine McClary. I'm the band director for the Yorkton School Band Program. Do you have a son named Alvin? We do. Does Alvin have a talent for music that you're aware of? He loves music. We're not sure if he's talented or not. Sorry. Why are you calling? Well, Mrs. Law, all 11-year-olds in Yorkton have to take a music aptitude test. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, and your son got 96%. Wow, that is a good mark, Mrs. Law. That's why we're calling. We'd love him to join the band. Really? Yes. Well, that seems to surprise you. Oh, yeah, it's a bit of a surprise. Can I just ask you a question? Sure. Did you have an instrument in mind? You know, Mrs. Law, we normally don't do this, but I'm kind of inclined to give you a special offer. Why don't you bring your kid up to the high school sometime next week? He can pick any instrument he wants. Oh, Mr. McClary, that sounds incredibly generous. I can't wait to tell Alvin the good news. He's at school. She said, I know, that's why I'm calling you. I need your permission. You got it, sir. Well, I'll tell him when he comes home, and then we can arrange a meeting. Great. I got one more question for you, though. Sure. Have you met him? No, I just got his phone number here. I'm kind of going through a list. I'm the boss. You know, I'm at the office. Well, sir, kind of an important time to tell you that Alvin kind of has no arms. Are you following the call in real time? Hello? Mr. McClary, are you still there? Yeah, I'm here. What did you just say? I said, Alvin has no arms. And he said, you can't make this stuff up. You're kidding. No, I'm not kidding. He was born that way. Wow. Really? I can't believe it. And he got 96% on that test. Yes. Okay, I'm confused, but I got to tell you, Mrs. Law, really, honestly, we can't have a kid in the band with no arms. You know, really, I'm sorry. That's real. That's cruel. I apologize. You know what? Have a nice day. Click. That's what happened. Now you're thinking, okay, wait, but you played in the band. I did. Don't get ahead of me. The fact of the matter is, that's a real phone call, and that's a real moment. And this is my favorite point to make about how simple the 2 sides of a belief system are. Most of our society, not because it's mean or terrible or horrible, just wouldn't bother phoning back, would it? And yet this room is full of people that would. Isn't it? You don't have to be here. No one forced you here. So it makes you incredible, not only in your profession, but in your philosophical index of life, right? Look what you're doing. Thank you. You're making a difference. You're the phone backers, I call you. The phone backers are changing the world because the phone backers have this implement in their brain that says, we got to do something to make things better. Maybe it worked, maybe it won't, I don't know. All I know is I walk in the house 6 weeks later, my mom has this look on her face. I've never seen that look like I've seen that day. She had a great smile, ugly teeth, great smile. And she says, Alvin, you're not going to believe this. You're going to be in the band. Really? Yeah, we got to go meet this band director. Do you remember this test? We got in the car, we're driving and talked about the first phone call and how he hung up and how he called back that morning and how he's got an instrument for me to play. And I go to the school and I'm so excited and I meet Mr. McClary and he doesn't seem like anybody special, just a regular dude. And I met 2 more teachers at the high school in Yorkton. The woodworking teacher, his name was Mr. Wood. And that comes into play here real quick. And we went to the back of the school to the vocational wing where they taught the trades. And in the middle of a floor was a really funny-looking wooden chair. The right arm had been sawed off, and the left arm had a metal rod with a clamp welded on the top, bolted to the side of the chair, and there was another one on the back, and on the floor was a long black leather case. Mr. McClary opened up the case, took out, put together, and inserted in these clamps a trombone. A trombone! Didn't see that one coming, did you? And he said, can you move the slide with your foot? Yeah, I can do that. Can you make this noise? Okay, can you do it in the mouthpiece and move the slide? Well, this noise came out. 11-year-olds love noise. So I played a little bit, locked the slide, sat there in absolute confusion. I did not look at that moment and go, I know what my whole life is going to be now. Do we? It's silly to say that. Because I believe some of the most significant moments in your life happen without you even knowing it. Some of the most significant moments in your life happen without you even knowing it. I'm almost done. 1978, I was the lead chair trombone player in Canada's National All-Star High School Jazz Band. I was ranked #1 in the nation. Don't clap. But I say that because all I ever think about every day of my life is not, what if I wouldn't have been born without arms? Is not, what if I was not given up for adoption? Is not, what if I was raised by a foster home? Is not even about going to school. It's about, what if Blaine McClary hadn't called back? Because that other life would have been fine. I would have had an existence. But to have a life, that took a phone call. And it took an instrument. And it took a belief system that I developed in my basement playing my trombone and then my drums, and understanding that I've got incredible power. But what happens when you put my power together with a bunch of other people that believe the same thing? And that's called a band. And when you put a band together, it is amazing. We're going to run this video, what you can accomplish, but not just a band, a movement. Let me show you something real special to my heart. Gentlemen, can we run this video? And then I'm going to wrap up. Check this out.